Well, good evening, everybody. I thank you once again for your patience. Sorry for the technical problems. I thank the participants, but also interpreters and speakers for their patience. So we are going to start. I'm Eva Pastorelli, the CBOT network, so the group of environmentalists of Central and Eastern Europe, engaged since 25 years in the climate, in the European energy industry climate policies. So this is the first webinar of the series, which recommend with the Deute Observatory of Globalization will realize under the observatory. It's a project which sees the cooperation with 9 European organizations, asking at a national and international level more transparency and a fair distribution of public funds and to focus on communities' voice. So welcome to the speakers of our session of today. Professor Leonardo Setti of the University of Bologna, Filippo Taglieri, Energy and Infrastructure Researchers and Campaigner, and Bruna Cagnata, Researchers, Observatory del Deute en la Globalización. Before starting with the webinar, I'd like to give you some practical information. You know, there is the simultaneous translation, English, French, and Spanish. By clicking on the world icon, you can decide which language you can listen to. Questions can be asked in a written way through the function questions and answer. This is the only function we activated. There is no chat. So I invite you just to write questions and not comments. In the second part of the webinar, we will try to give you some answer to all questions, but if for time reasons we are not able to answer to all questions, we will then answer after the event. We can start with the Green Deal, that is the roadmap of the European Union in order to reach the goal of carbon neutrality, so-called zero emissions by 2050. We know that renewable hydrogen plays a key role in achieving this goal. So we don't know where it will be produced, but with the Next Generation EU from Brussels, the indication has been the one of giving priority to green hydrogen, so hydrogen produced by renewable sources. So this is a proposal that has been reviewed in the context of the Ukrainian war. With Repower EU, we open to the possibility to finance a project with hydrogen that is not the green one. So which kind of hydrogen has to be financed? We can understand that Brussels institutions and governments are interested in having public funds in order to modify the kilometers of pipelines, existing pipelines to transport hydrogen. Even if we decide to just use green hydrogen, and I ask this question to Professor Setti, are we sure that the whole will be sustainable from an economical point of view? So will the production chain be sustainable for the future? So I ask Leonardo Setti to answer to this question. And there will be also another researcher who elaborated a study on the topic. So I give you the floor now, Professor Leonardo Setti. I think you will be able to project your presentation. First of all, thank you for the invitation. Good evening, everyone. I'll try to share the screen. Okay, so just to understand if hydrogen is an opportunity or a business, we can really summarize with few data. First of all, let's see the charm of hydrogen. Hydrogen is an energy vector which behaves as all gases, as all gas vectors, and it can be used for thousands of applications, also because it has an energy content which is very high. So we can use it as we do nowadays for the chemical industry, for fertilizers and so on. So we can use it to produce molecules, but we can also use it for refining and so on. And on the other side, we can use it as we use methane, for instance, so to heat the house, to move a car. We can use it just to for standard applications, and we could use it also as accumulator of energy in order to accumulate the exceeding energy produced by renewable energies in order to then use it in moments when renewable energies are not there. So it's a vector which is extremely flexible. Today in the world, we produce about 90 million tons per year of this vector, and in Europe we produce 10 million tons per year. So here you see the progression of hydrogen production starting from 2000 till 2020, and you see that the production of hydrogen is increasing, and the hydrogen, as you can see from this image, is produced for use in the field of refining, for production of chemicals, the industrial chemistry, and also for the production of iron and steel, and we have also other applications. We know in the scenario we made a reference at before, so we have the idea to increase the demand up to 500 billion euro, because the hydrogen market is a market of 100 billion euros. So the fact of duplicating and this market will have an interest in terms of business, but hydrogen is not enough if only applied on the chemistry sector, but also in other sectors where nowadays hydrogen is not present. So transport, production of heating for industries, or for the accumulation, as I said before, for the national grid. Hydrogen today is produced in two different ways, and de facto all the worldwide hydrogen is produced as a gray hydrogen. So hydrogen coming from the oil sector through um, uh, cracking procedures in order to produce the hydrogen we use. But the production of this hydrogen is also a source of carbon dioxide, because the transformation of hydrogens in metal emits carbon dioxide. The production cost is €1 per kilogram. So for the industry, for the industrial chemistry, this is an important source. So another way to produce hydrogen could be starting from methane. We can accumulate and stock CO2 underground in order to eliminate it as a source of emission of carbon dioxide. So the CO2 produced by the refining on one side gives hydrogen, and on the other side, CO2 is emitted in accumulation stocks underground, and we call it blue hydrogen. And blue hydrogen has a higher cost because obviously we have to accumulate CO2, we have to stock CO2, and on the other side, we can say that it could produce a nitrogen having low emissions. And the other possibility is the one of having green hydrogen. So hydrogen through the electrolysis procedures. So on one side, we produce hydrogen, on the other side, we produce oxygen, and this has to be done through the consumption of electric energy. And in the case of green hydrogen, we have to use electricity produced by renewables, so the exceeding energy coming from renewable energies. In this case, we would not have CO2 emissions, but we would have a huge water usage. Another way in order to produce hydrogen could be the pink hydrogen using not only the electric energy from renewables, but using the energy coming from the nuclear plants, because you know that the European Union has decided that nuclear energy can be considered as a green energy in order to face the energy transition. But as you see, the costs for the production of this hydrogen would be very high, because we have to install PV plants and we also have to use the grid and electric energy. And this will complicate the costs and duplicate the costs. The solution we do not expect is the white hydrogen, because you know that we do not find hydrogen in a natural way. But in reality, what we are discovering now is that there are some hydrogen pockets, as we have, for instance, methane pockets in the underground. So we have basins of hydrogens that are not so big, because hydrogen, being a small molecule, tends to escape and we cannot bind it because of gravity. And this causes dispersion. In fact, usually in our atmosphere, hydrogen is not present. But the fact is that these basins that are, we can say, obsolete ones, old ones, contain small quantities of hydrogen. In fact, we speak about a huge reserve discovered by Française d'Energie, which is of 46 million tons, but we use 90 million tons per year. So this means half of the worldwide production in terms of hydrogen. And then this hydrogen is at a depth of 600 to 1,000 meters. So it's obvious that there will be other costs that are involved. So the question is the following one. Um, have we the capacity to produce all the amount of hydrogen that we need? So this hydrogen we imagine to inject in our society 500 billion tons per year. Are we able to produce this? So this is the question. If we think to be able to produce green hydrogen as everyone dream and as everyone thinks, um, or if, for instance, we can produce pink hydrogen from the nuclear plants, we have to consider the whole electric energy production. And if we consider, for instance, the PV or the wind plants, these are the production we have at a worldwide level. If we consider the production of nuclear energy at a worldwide level, this is something which is produced worldwide. And so through these quantities, if all these quantities would be destined to hydrogen, liquid hydrogen or compressed hydrogen, so we would be able just to produce 117 million tons per year. So 100 million tons per year. So with all renewable plants, plus the nuclear reactors producing electric energy nowadays, will allow to produce what we consume today and not more. So this is a very important data. Uh, Nuclear will satisfy only 1/3 of the global hydrogen demand. So we should have 3 times more production of nuclear energies. So let's say that we will have to add some renewable energies. And if we want to reach 500 billion tons, we have to multiply by 5 the installation of PVs. We have to multiply per by 5 the number of nuclear reactors. So this is almost impossible. We are not able to multiply what we have by 5. So it's difficult to have what we have today. And let's imagine multiplying by 5. But let's speak about, for instance, Italy. In Italy, we have as objective the one of achieving 700 kilotons within 2030, and within 2050, 10 million tons in order to cover 2% of the energy needs or up to 20% of energy needs. So if we consider PV and wind plants, all renewables we have installed in Italy nowadays, at the maximum, will allow us to produce the objective of 2030. Consider that in Italy, we produce and consume more or less 480 kilotons per year for oil infrastructure and to produce fertilizers and so on. So as you can see, also at an Italian level, doing the same exercise, we could reach at the maximum goal of 2030. But what can we do with 700 kilotons? So if we see the conversion factors, if we produce hydrogen and through fuel cell that are the devices converting hydrogen into electricity, we know that starting from 6 kilowatt hours in order to produce hydrogen, we will have at the end just 2 kilowatt hours, so two-thirds of the energy we've used to produce hydrogen will be lost. So of 47.9 terawatt hours we produce from PV and wind plants, if we transform everything into hydrogen, the output will be 15.5 terawatt hours, so one-third of what we have used at the beginning. So we have lost 32.4 terawatt hours of primary energy. So with these 15.5 terawatt hours, we can feed 8 million of electric vehicles, or we can cover 9% of the total electric energy consumed during the night. So the energy we should produce when the renewables like the solar is not running. So as you can see, with the whole quantity we have today, we will recover a very low amount. And then we have also the impact of electrolyzers. If we see two typical days in June and in December when we have the winter and the summer solstice, you can see that through the production of PV, we could use all this amount, exceeding amount. So the blue line is the quantity of energy, the quantity of power we will ask to the Italian grid in a typical day from midnight to midnight. We can say in green you see the wind, while in yellow you see the PV production today. So this exceeding part will be the one that we could use in order to produce our hydrogen. So in a timeline, a very short timeline, the blue part you see is the quantity of energy that we will ask more in order to use electrolyzer. And this is not a low quantity, this is a huge quantity. For instance, many tells if everyone if everyone has electric vehicles, the impact will be important. But as you can see in winter, for instance, the situation is more complicated because the exceeding energy is very low. So from that point of view, we can use electrolyzers for a short time frame. So we cannot have 8 hours per day from November to February. We have a few hours of productivity working on the exceeding energy. Mr. Setti, sorry to interrupt you, just to remind you that you have 3 minutes at your disposal before concluding. So I kindly ask you to conclude your presentation. And the other thing is that all the production we produce from wind and PV doesn't cover the Italian needs in terms of energy. So in order to have more than 100 gigawatt compared to the 25th gigawatt, and we should have, as far as wind is concerned, 44 gigawatt compared to 11 gigawatt. So in this scenario, only 8 million vehicles or 10% of the total electric energy consumed during the night could be supplied. And then we have also uh, the need to buy fuel cells and electrolyzers. So considering these, we have an inconvenient truth. On one side, the Italian production of 700 kilotons per year of green hydrogens in 2035 will be very difficult to be produced, and let's imagine to reach 10 million tons. This means to have renewables in an amount that it's impossible. And then, so what is the possible solution? We can come back again to blue hydrogen coming from methane, or we can import green hydrogen from Morocco, Chile, Algeria, or Saudi Arabia. So we can import through the specific ships. So we could start to think about the reclassifying ships and we can also use and revamp international pipelines for transporting hydrogen from Middle East to Europe, for instance. So in this case, we would create again dependency on other countries. So this is a difficulty because we're not able to produce hydrogens. What are the alternatives? We can do what we call electrochemical storage, so use batteries. Why this? Because it's a simple datum. If you have 47.9 terawatt hours in battery, you will have then as output 43.1 terawatt hours. So with these output, you can have the feeding of 22 million of electric vehicles and 25% of total electric energy consumed during the night. And furthermore, you can see this could be the impact of the increase in energy consumption for 10 million of the battery electric vehicle, BEV, in 2035, so 5 gigawatt of power. So also from that point of view, it would be better to follow this direction. And then electric vehicles could be used, exhausted batteries could be used as accumulation. And so this could be a possibility and an increase in megapack. Accumulation system could give a huge quantity of energy and a huge quantity of immediate power on the Italian grid. So this will improve more and more our Italian grid. And then just to end, batteries have an evolution starting from 2020. In 2020, we use lithium and cobalt. Nowadays, we use lithium and iron. And in 2026, we will have batteries, sodium, iron, and phosphate batteries, fuel cells in order to convert hydrogen to uh, electric energy. Today, are made up of platinum. In the past, platinum was always used, and in the future will be used also platinum. And the cost is 70 euros per gram. So much more compared to gold, that is 50 euros per gram. So these are not rare elements. So here we have a solution, and on the other side, we do not have solution, but just an illusion. The illusion of having the possibility to charge our car in 5 minutes. Thank you. Thank you, Professor. It has been exhaustive in a very short time frame. I hope we will have the possibility in the future to speak about that again. And I invite participants to read the report and the research mentioned, and we can give all these documents after the meeting.
And as you were saying before, there are some strategies to modify and renew the existing gas pipelines that, as I was saying before, the oil and gas lobbies are trying to finance with public funds. And this renewal of the infrastructure is the main goal of these oil and gas companies. And then now I would like to give the floor to the next panelist, Filippo Taglieri. And we know that there has been a recent report published by Recommon, and you have unveiled how the fossil fuel sector, led by SNAM, has tried to impose its agenda on hydrogen onto the government for blue and green hydrogen in order to allow the renewal of infrastructure. So, Filippo, what can you tell us about the new energy sector, Repower EU, and the recovery plan? Thank you and good evening, everybody. And I would like to give you just a quick overview about the context here in Italy, especially for those who do not live in Italy. So we're talking about a government which has had a precious heritage from the Draghi government. And this slide, as you can see, is taken from the introduction of the new version of the resiliency plan. And actually, we've seen that the connection with the large companies in the energy sector, Eni, Enel, Snam, and Terna, which are the main companies working in the field of electric power distribution on the long haul. Snam for gas and Terna for electric power. And this government has found itself in the condition to have to reduce the impact of some measures, because Repower EU had a strong impact on the resiliency plan. The second resiliency plan has three and so the reduction was from 5 billion to 3 billion, and and I can anticipate that the options that we have provide for 160 million euros for R&D, and the Ministry of the Environment has implicitly admitted about the gas pipelines that we need further R&D regarding the gas pipelines, which can transport 100% hydrogen. And 500 million for hydrogen next month. This is another illusion connected to hydrogen. There's a hydrogen may become practical for economy, but in Italy, unfortunately, hydrogen which provides any funds of the hydrogen sector and the investments provided for the plan just on Transport and the Ministry of Transport about buses, and trains. Various modes of using hydrogen at least effective. Hard to stir, which has been cut in terms of R&D, is one of the few sectors which could be taken into consideration, because in Italy we have steel factories and cement factories which are still powered by fossil fuels. And the hydrogen plan, the Italian hydrogen plan, can also be found in other parts of the recovery plan, even if it is not clearly stated that these parts of the recovery plan regard hydrogen. You can see here how the financing was split. Now I would like to talk about the new plan, which dates back to July, and it consists of three missions, which are macro objectives to be reached, and 6 reforms have to be implemented in order to reach these goals, these objectives. And the grid's mission is among the most important ones, and it aims at reorganizing, at least officially, the distribution networks, both for electric power and gas. So here we can see that there are some infrastructures which seem to have nothing to do with hydrogen, but they are indeed connected to hydrogen. We're talking about the Tyrrhenian link, which is a cable with a capacity of 1 gigawatt, which connects Sardinia, Sicily, and Campania. And then the Sacco 3, which is another connection between Sardinia, Corsica, and Italy. And there is a planning of hyper production in Sardinia, which would allow to transport large amounts of energy elsewhere. So part of this energy would be channeled into the national grids, while the other part regards the ghost of hydrogen. So creating corridors allowing to transport hydrogen from the production sites to the grid. And I'm talking about North Africa and other Italian sites, which could be used for the production of hydrogen. And also, as far as the financing of gas infrastructures, which would benefit Snam as usual, have the same objective, because as far as the SNAM project of doubling the Adriatic backbone has been inserted into Repower EU. And this doubling of the Adriatic line, the Adriatic backbone, will become part of the southern corridor of hydrogen connecting Algeria, Austria, Germany, and Italy. And this is an infrastructure which is not really useful for transporting gas, but it also conceals a mega hydrogen backbone, which is something which would benefit the private investors in Europe. And the export phase 1 is a set of investments which also conceal another strategy. Italy, with the excuse of energy security, is implementing this strategy aimed at having Italy become a country which exports gas towards other European countries, namely Austria and Germany. And this has already occurred this year in increasingly larger amounts. And then we have Eni taking part in the recovery part. So in addition to the 300 million euro allocated for the conversion of traditional refineries into the so-called biorefineries, there is also the introduction of the CCS plant, CO2 capture and storage. And this is an infrastructure that Eni and Snam are designing for the Ravenna site. It is an infrastructure aimed at capturing and storing CO2 into exhaustion pits. And this project, unfortunately, has been proposed again and again, but it has never passed the pilot phase. The risks are not clear, but this is a huge project which would not even meet the goals of CO2 capturing and storaging in Ravenna, which is a very small town. And you have a very short time. These are initial changes for recovery plan. CCS plant, of course, regards blue hydrogen, as we've said. People, thank you. Thank you very much. And I would like to remind you that this is only the first webinar. We will organize another 2 webinars on hydrogen, and we will have the opportunities to delve more in depth what hydrogen is about and how the hydrogen rainbow will be financed with public funds in the future. So I would like to thank people once again. And I would like to give the floor to Bruna. And we will now move to Spain, another researcher of Osservatorio del Deuta en la Globalización. Bruna, I would like to ask you how much green hydrogen is provided for by your resiliency plan and its review, and what is the role of Spain in the European context. Please unmute yourself. Thank you. Thank you very much. Good evening. And I would like to tell you that, as you probably already know, this next generation is an instrument that we're going to analyze. Can you see my screen? Can you see my slides? And it's fine. We can see it. So next generation is an instrument, the main instrument enabling the mechanism of recovery and resiliency, and this mechanism is what national plans are based on. And these funds have been activated after the pandemic in order to enable recovery and the reconstruction of Europe, which has a greener, more resilient economy. But maybe we're not talking about actual green, but about greenwashing. And Spain, France, Italy, and the UK in 2020 were already the countries whose economies had been impacted the most by the pandemic, and Italy, followed by Spain, where the countries being allocated the largest amount of funds by this mechanism of recovery and resilience. These funds for Spanish economy are extremely important, and in general, we can see that the plan España Puede, or the resiliency transformation and the recovery plan, is structured into several strategic plans which enable the cooperation of the public and private sector, which receives the funds directly from the state. The microelectronics and semiconductors and the renewable energy, renewable hydrogen and electric vehicles are the three sectors which receive the largest amount of funds, and they are channeled, which are channeled into the energy, technology, and automotive sectors. And this proves that the energy transition that we can find in this plan is a transition which aims at implementing huge projects about renewable energies, such as hydrogen. Universities have started with courses, and there is mobilization of public funds with the aim of channeling these public funds. CEPSA, Hydrola are all large companies which have committed themselves to use these funds and then work in a European perspective. As we will see in the next webinars, there are two main objectives here. One is production for domestic consumption, and the other goal is production for international consumption and exports. And Spain aims at becoming a European hub, and we can see that these funds are not simply funds allocated for green hydrogen, but 450 million euros have been allocated to decarbonising projects, such as the one promoted by ArcelorMittal. As people mentioned, this happens in Italy too. I'm sorry about the speed of this slide. And here we can see the analysis of a concrete program on renewable energy, and here we can see a map which was derived from some case studies. In blue and in gray, you can see projects financed directly by Next Generation EU, and we can see that these grids, hydrogen grids, you can see the ones which are meant to be finished by 2030, and the spotted line indicates the grids to be completed by 2050. And we can see that there is a will to connect gas to green energies. And we're talking about an existing gas grid. And I would like to give you an example, the energy park, the energy farm of San Roque, which is a project based in Cadiz, in Andalusia, And this is the first step of the famous Andalusian ballet, Andalusian dance of hydrogen. So wind farms and PV farms will power the production of hydrogen, and this hydrogen is supposed to be transported to the Netherlands and then be distributed to the rest of Europe or other countries. So here you can see an explanation of this matter. We've seen that in Italy and in Spain, they're talking about these hydrogen valleys.
Climate neutral para 2050 y con la voluntad de descarbonizar la industria, pues también se ha hecho como una asociación europea de los valles del hidrógeno. Para poder desarrollar así la tecnología, poder crear o reforzar una cadena de valor, producir, ¿no?, este hidrógeno verde. Y por lo tanto los valles de hidrógeno se definen como estos ecosistemas, ecosistemas integrados
So
alrededor de la cadena de
these
valor del
are like
hidrógeno, para
integrated
poder
ecosystem
crear infraestructuras que estén
in order to
interconectadas y
create
convertir
infrastructures, interconnected
pues,
infrastructures.
destinadas a la producción, al almacenamiento y a la distribución del hidrógeno.
Have
Y
their
aquí vemos un mapa
production up to
de la
the
misma Comisión
accumulation
Europea
of
tiene
hydrogen.
descrito
Here you can see a
que
map
bueno, que sale
showing
de esta asociación
these
para
valleys, and this
para
is
los valles de
something
hidrógeno,
available to the
en los
European
que se
Commission. It's a
registran, ¿no?, todas las
publication
regiones o
available,
las comunidades
and
autónomas, en
there
el
you
caso de
find
España,
all regions
o
and
bien que viven,
communities.
en el caso sería de Aragón, o bien que,
Here in
que
blue,
participan en este pacto. Y vemos, pues,
you
como
find the
muchas, ¿no?,
regions
comunidades implicadas
where
en la promoción
the
de estos valles
valley is
del hidrógeno.
created, while in
También vemos, pues,
yellow you see
Cepsa hablando
regions
de
which
sus
are
proyectos
binded
que
to the
realmente pues va a
project in
ser
terms
como
of
la primavera
financing and so on. So this is a project which could
y bueno, pues
represent the
ya para
first
ir cerrando,
step
volvemos
ahead.
un poco a lo que sería
Just to conclude,
el título, ¿no?,
we can
el
come back
título
a bit
de este webinar.
on
La división
the
del
title,
hidrógeno
to the
verde.
title of
Ya
these
hablamos de
webinar. So,
distribución.
illusion of green
Porque, bueno,
hydrogen. Why we speak about
a gran
illusion?
escala el
Because
hidrógeno verde, ¿no?, puede ser insostenible. Ya
a
todavía
wider
es una
scale,
tecnología que está
green
siendo
hydrogen is not available.
desarrollada, ¿no?,
It is a technology
y también
which
tiene
is
algunos impactos
uh,
negativos. O sea,
which is
también
developing, we can
debemos ir
say,
hacia lo
and
renovable, ¿no?
we have
Pero
also
debemos tener
negative
en cuenta que
sides
este
of
renovar
this
también tiene impactos.
procedure. We have to move
En
towards
primer lugar, pues
renewable
mencionar
energies, but also renewable energies
que
have
si
an
bien
impact.
gran parte
And
de
we
los
can
pasos
say,
fundamental a
first of
través de este
all,
programa
that even
que
if
comentábamos,
part
el programa
of
Pioneer,
the cases financed
estén en una
by the
primera
program,
fase o
so the
proyectos piloto que
pioneering,
también pasan en
the
el caso de
pilot
Italia, ¿no?
projects,
Pues
for instance, in Italy,
básicamente lo que se
are
buscaba, ¿no?, es
there.
que se siga promoviendo
Anyway,
un modelo
we
energético bastante
noticed that
centralizado,
we promoted
eh,
up to now a
que las
centralized
propuestas sobre la
system,
mesa son
and
grandes proyectos
proposals on the
y,
table are
a través de los
huge
cuales, ¿no?,
projects
el oligopolio energético
through
que
which
siempre ha tenido el poder en el Estado español, pues seguirá
the
beneficiándose de ello,
energy
¿no?,
power, we can
este
say, the
nuevo modelo de producción.
oligopoly will have
Y por lo tanto, pues como se
benefits. So
están llevando a cabo
this is the reason
una
why
transición pensando en cambios estructurales, pensando
we are
en
going
realmente
to work.
cuáles son las necesidades energéticas reales y las realistas, ¿no? Porque vemos que los recursos se van agotando y el planeta es finito.
which will entail a lot
Además,
of repercussions. And we
también
know that resources
vemos
are
cómo
depleting and we have to
las
find new
principales,
solutions.
si bien en
Furthermore,
un inicio se quería que
we
las
see
principales
also
beneficiarias
that
esas
the main
de los proyectos fueran pymes, es decir,
beneficiaries of all these
medianas empresas,
projects
pues hemos
are
visto
not small and
como
medium
cantidades de
enterprises.
dinero,
We
¿no?
have
Que van,
noticed
importantes que van se destinan o son captadas por empresas como
a lot
Cepsa,
of
Gas
money
o
is
Iberdrola. En el caso de Cepsa, por ejemplo, si se
injected
pudiera recibir un máximo de 15 millones de euros en un
big
proyecto, Cepsa
enterprises.
recibirá
So
13
in a
millones en este
project,
caso, pero es que también
if we can
cabe mencionar
reach
que
15
en el
million, 13
2022,
are
por
for
ejemplo,
CEPSA. In
Cepsa tuvo un
2022, for
beneficio
instance,
neto que
CEPSA
se destinó de
has
90 millones de
obtained
euros,
a
en
net
Gas de
benefit of
175 millones, de Iberdrola
790
de
million
475
euros and
millones de
Verdrola
euros. Y en ese caso, las ayudas
438
públicas son a fondo perdido, es decir, no tienen que devolver ni un
100,000
euro
euros. So
de
these
dinero público.
are funds
En tercer lugar, también mencionar
which have
que
not to be
detrás
reimbursed. So it's
bueno, de
important to
este España
mention,
como hub europeo
furthermore,
o también de lo
that
que ya ha nombrado Pipo y que puede ser
Spain,
renewables
as
VM
well as
para
other
producir
countries,
hidrógeno,
but anyway, Spain
necesitan
as European
cambiar sus
hub
planes de energía. También lo ha mencionado el profesor.
needs
Pero toda esa energía
important energy
renovable
levels, as the
no
professor
se
said, and
usa para
these
utilizar hidrógeno
renewable
verde, para
energy
la
we
exportación es
use
energía renovable que se
for
va a destinar a
uh,
otros usos internos del país.
exportation is
También
not
decir que
catered to
esta energía
other
renovable
needs
se
within
produce
the
a través de
country. So we have
placas
to
solares,
say that this
aerogeneradores,
renewable
y estas placas
energy
solares
is
llevan materias
produced
primas
with
críticas.
solar
Y
panels,
estas materias
with
primas
materials,
se obtienen
raw
en
materials that are
países
critical ones
mayoritariamente
and
del
that
sur
can be
global o de
obtained
zonas de
mainly
sacrificio, zonas
by
típicamente de
southern
extracción,
countries,
donde hay
areas
prácticas extractivistas
where
y pues
there is a huge mining
los casos, ¿no?
activity with
Y
colonial
por último, pues hablar
uh,
de la
structures,
eficiencia
we can
energética,
say.
que ya lo
And
hemos
then,
mencionado un poco, ¿no? Que, bueno,
as far as
de momento los procesos de obtención del hidrógeno
energy
tienen una
emergency
eficiencia
concerned,
baja y durante el transporte y
hydrogen
también hay unas
production
pérdidas de
has
energía.
a low efficiency
Y
and there is
estos
a
son los
loss of
efectos
energy in the
que puede
process. So
tener,
this
¿no?
is
O que
another
ya está
effect
teniendo. Es que, por ejemplo, en
we can
España,
have.
algunas comunidades autónomas
We already had
ya han
also in
modificado
Spain
las
some
leyes sobre la
autonomous
tierra para acelerar la
areas have
instalación de energías
modified
renovables.
the laws concerning the use of
Eso
lands in
se
order to
traduce en
implement
una ocupación de
infrastructure,
tierras
and this
fértiles y
translates
también en una
into
destrucción de la
uh,
biodiversidad.
the
Pero
use
no solo eso.
in the use of
Am,
of lands
bueno,
and
¿por qué? Porque,
destruction of
claro, para producir
biodiversity. But
la
this is
energía
not
necesitamos
enough
parques
because in order to
ya
produce
sean
energy, we
eólicos
need to
o
have
fotovoltaicos, pero
wind
también se necesita un espacio, ¿no?
areas
Ah,
with wind plants, PV
para
plants, and we
poder
need
hacer esta
space for that.
electrólisis. Pero también la electrólisis, para poder separar
Make
la molécula del agua,
electrolysis a
pues
reality. In
necesitamos
order to
agua.
separate water,
Eh,
you also need
en el caso
water,
de
abundant water,
electrólisis, pues necesita
and
9
this
litros de agua
is
por tonelada de energía.
extremely negative in case
Entonces,
of
nos
water
estamos hablando
stress
de que el
situations.
cambio climático está afectando, ¿no? Especialmente a la región, y
That
afectará a la región del Mediterráneo.
all
Estamos en una
this
situación de
creates
hecho
troubles
donde el agua es
in the
necesaria para los
climate
cultivos y para la vida en general. Y este
environment.
hidrógeno verde, pues,
Water is
será una
needed
cuestión
for
sobre la marcha.
cultivation, so
Ya.
green hydrogen will have
Grazie,
a huge
grazie
pressure
Bruno per
on water.
questa presentazione.
Thank you
Passerei, visto che
for
ce ne
this
sono
presentation.
molte,
We have many questions and we have also technical questions. So we received them above all for Professor Setti, but we already knew it was the case. Professor, I don't know if you can see the questions, but anyway, I can just ask you one. Beltramba tells us that in 2021 in Germany there were 3 serious bus fires. And I just ask you these questions, but I don't know if you can answer. So we have also the emails. So as I said to you, in 2001, there were 3 serious bus fires in Germany. About 85 vehicles, including electric and diesel, were destroyed. So are sodium-ion batteries flammable? Sodium metal is known to be very reactive even with moisture in the air. Yes, yes, I can answer. So all technologies we use have pros and cons. If we consider oil, it has pros and cons. Oil cars explodes in an easy way, but electrical vehicles are more of a scoop. So the fact of extinguishing a fire on an electric vehicle entails a lot of troubles. The same problem when we have a diesel tank, like it was the case in Bologna, and we had a huge trouble there. So it's obvious that technologies have impacts. As we said before, there are impacts on raw material extraction, but it's true that the technological risk can be reduced through the implementation and improvement of technologies. And this is what we are doing in the battery field. We are improving batteries. We are trying to reduce impacts on extraction. Simple example, the replacement of lithium with sodium, it's very important. Imagine that in Sicily in, in 1875, salt was produced, 200 tons of salt, and salt can be used. And so we could produce sodium. If Italy would choose options in that direction, we could become producers of sodium batteries with 200,000 tons. So we can create really a lot of cars, and in 2 years we would satisfy the needs in terms of cars in Italy. Technologies have negative points, but we can improve also technologies over time. It's clear that today we have to use lithium in order to have then within 1 year or two sodium. Today we already sell sodium, but we need the market to go towards that direction. It's obvious that there are troubles, but I believe this is not a tragedy. Thank you, Professor. Other questions? This is a question for Bruna. Emanuele asks us if with the extraction of the materials for batteries, we do not risk of replacing fossil fuel extractivism with a new form of extractivism. So what would be the environmental impact of extracting the elements needed to make batteries? Is there not a risk of replacing fossil fuels? I've not understood the question. Can you repeat it, please? What would be the environmental impact of extracting the elements needed to make batteries? Is there not a risk of replacing fossil fuel extractivism with a new form of extractivism? Maybe you can answer to this second question if you want. Now it's okay.
Bueno, el impacto en términos numéricos,
The impact
ahora mismo,
in terms of figures,
sí que existe estudios
it's
de
obvious
la
that
International Energy
there are
Agency
some studies
que
by
miden
National
con
Energy
gráficos, ¿no? ¿Cuál
Agency.
sería el aumento de demanda que se
There
plantea
are
ahora
graphs
las
showing the increase in
emisiones que se
demand
plantean el aumento de demanda de estas materias primeras
through
críticas, ¿no?
the
Y en algunos
energy
casos,
transition. So we think
pues
there will be
la
a
demanda
higher
aumenta
demand of
un
these
140%,
material, and in
o
some
no, y hablando
cases,
estamos
demand
hablando de la demanda de
increases by
litio, cobalto, ¿no?
140%.
Todos
So there
estos
are
elementos.
huge
Y, pero
increases,
es que, claro,
lithium,
no podemos
cobalt,
medir
and
el
other.
impacto solo con
But
números,
we
¿no?
cannot
Porque
measure
hay
the impact
impactos
only using figures and making
medioambientales,
reference to them,
impactos
because then there
sociales
are other
de
impacts at an
desestructuración de
environmental
territorios.
level. There
Y
are
bueno,
impacts
sí, se
on
mide así, se mide el riesgo,
societies,
¿no? De
on
si se producen
territories. So
unos
yes, we
extractivismos,
run
unas
the risk
prácticas
of
no coloniales por otras.
replacing
Y de hecho ya estamos
an
haciéndolo. Y antes
extractivism
el
with
vicecretario
new
de la Comisión
forms
para
of
Energía y Clima decía
extractivism,
así.
and this is what's happening nowadays.
Pero, por
There
ejemplo,
was also a colleague from
el caso de
Chile
litio en Chile, Argentina y
was
Bolivia, ¿no?
connected,
O
and
en
I
Chile,
thought
que
about
ha
the
sido productor
case
de
of
cobre
lithium in Chile, Bolivia. Chile was
hace
a
unos años y ahora
producer
también.
of
Entonces
copper,
está poniendo mucha presión para la
very
producción de
important
este litio que
copper
también
producer
necesitan
in the
para
last
baterías
years.
o
And
vehículos
now
eléctricos
this is a
o
country
estos elementos
aiming at
que van a las
producing
placas
lithium.
solares. Por eso,
Lithium
por eso
is
es
extremely
necesario. O sea,
important to
necesitamos
produce
planificar
electric
hacia lo
items and
renovable, pero
electric
también necesitamos
components.
hacer
So we
conscientes,
need
¿no?
a
De los
transition
impactos que
towards
quizás
renewable energy. But at the
no solo
same
aquí, sino
time, we have to be
que
aware
tenemos
of all
que tomar
impacts
conciencia de este mundo globalizado que
behind
somos
this
y
transition, and
también
we have to be
repensar
aware
el
of the
modelo
fact that we are
energético
in a
para
globalized world,
que se
and we have
adopten
to
sociedades
rethink
energéticas
energy
reales.
models in order to answer to the needs,
Grazie
to the
Bruno.
real
Rispondo
energy
con
needs.
questa domanda, poi alle 7 ci
Thank
lasciamo
you for this question,
e
for this answer,
Professor
sorry.
Setti, sempre
And
per
then
lei.
another question for Professor Setti.
Ho letto della possibilità di
I've
estrarre litio
read
da
about
impianti
the possibility
geotermici a
to
costo
extract the
zero. È
lithium
vero?
from zero
Sì, il
cost
litio non
plants.
è
Is it
elemento
true?
raro, il litio è
Yes,
uno
yes,
dei 26
lithium is
elementi più
not a
rari che
rare
abbiamo
element.
in
It is
natura.
the
Cioè il
26th
raro è
element
raro
we
è raro
found
nell'armadio
in
perché
the
sono pieni di
classification
litio, non
in
ce l'ha
terms of
meramente
abundancy.
Caterpillar
So
per
these
estrarre,
are
quindi occasionalmente
components.
litio
Lithium is
che rubano
in many components.
utilizzando
For
flessibili
instance,
o sfeghe elettriche
we have
alimentate da
exhaust
batterie
pipes in
appunto
the cars
non
that
è
are now
necessario, cioè non è che
stolen because
usiamo
there's a
le
lithium
batterie al litio per
inside.
guidare
So
le navi
we do
terrestri,
not.
che non sono esattamente una
We,
batteria
we,
catalitica,
we
sono
know
molto di
that a
più
catalytic
di una batteria al litio, anche litio cobalto.
exhaust
Ma
pipe
il punto è che appunto
is
il litio si può
valuable,
estrarre in
but
tanti modi,
lithium
ma
can be
attenzione perché quello che
extracted in
dicevo
many
prima,
ways. But pay
nel 2026
attention because in
il litio nelle
2026,
batterie delle
lithium in
automobili non l'avremo
batteries
più,
for
così come non
cars
l'avremo più
won't be present
il cobalto,
anymore,
come già
and we
oggi non
would
abbiamo più il
not
cobalto nelle
have
batterie delle
cobalt in
automobili perché
batteries.
saranno tutte da
Also
collegare
nowadays,
nel
we've
24, nel
not
20, nel
cobalt
25 cobalt
in
free, lo saranno anche nel
2024, and in
2025 continueremo ad avere
2025 there
il
will be
cobalto
cobalt-free
nel
and
cellulare,
lithium-free
continueremo ad
batteries.
averlo nelle
The same
batterie dei
for
computer e
smartphones.
in
We will
qualsiasi
have
modo,
it
perché per i
in
cellulari non
PC
abbiamo più batterie
batteries. For
sottili, lì abbiamo bisogno di quantità
smartphones, so we
autonome
need
per energia che devono
thin
partire
batteries, and
sull'argomento,
there we
mentre
need
nelle
lithium
batterie delle automobili
and
abbiamo
cobalt,
spazio
while
per fare
in
batterie più grandi
cars
e
we
quindi
have
possiamo
more
tranquillamente
space
fare
and
il
we
sodio
can
senza litio.
really use
Questo
sodium and
rispondere
iron. This means,
anche alla domanda della
just in order
collega
to
spagnola,
answer to the
per
Spanish,
aggiungere un elemento
to
da
add
fare
something to what
che
our Spanish
noi da una
colleague said,
parte
uh,
abbiamo
on
capacità
one
di
side, we
sviluppare
have the
tecnologie per
capacity to
sviluppare
develop technologies,
soluzioni.
to
Questione
develop
però di risolvere
solutions able
anche
to
il problema
solve
delle
also the
batterie zero,
problem
che
of
dicevamo prima, che
extractivism we
iniziamo per
spoke about
estrarre. Ci
before.
sono invece
But
settori
there are
in
also
cui quello
sectors
appunto
where,
delle batterie per i
for
cellulari,
instance,
in
the
cui siamo
batteries for
fortemente
smartphones,
bloccati
where we
e
are
possiamo
blocked.
uscire da
we cannot go beyond that logic, and that's the problem. We really need to analyze sector by sector. And nowadays we speak about rare lands in wind rotors, for instance, in the generators. Um, we have to pay attention because in the rare elements in those engines, in those rotors, have been replaced by rotors that do not need these elements and that we will find on the markets in the future years. So we have to make a distinction between an historical phase where we have to really use new technological elements, and a third, fourth phase when all these problems will be almost solved. And pay attention, because extractivism is not a scientific problem, it is a social problem, it is a political problem, because extractivism is something useful for huge systems. This is the reason why hydrogen is an illusion, because it's inevitable that we will have extractivism in the future, because it's a concentrated system, it's a vertical system, while renewable energies and batteries will allow us to have a horizontal system, a circular one, and this is something centralized enterprises fear. Thank you, Mr. Setti. We have ended our time for this evening. Before thanking everyone, I've seen that there are many, many questions on the chat. We will try to give an answer to all questions as far as the topic of this webinar. You will receive the recording of the webinar, and we will ask our speakers to give us the slides. I hope they will be available to do this. So we will give you the documents and the webinar recording. I just want to thank participants. We will see the 28th of September, 5:30, for the new webinar, The Ways of Hydrogen. And I thank the speakers, the interpreters, and everyone. Thank you very much. Thank you. See you next time. Bye.
Grazie, arrivederci. Ammazza, Eva.